The summer of 2025 dawned with a sense of optimism and celebration at the White House. President Trump, riding high on a wave of recent successes, appeared confident and energized as he greeted supporters on the sunlit South Lawn. The mood in Washington was buoyant, with many believing that a new era of American strength and prosperity was just beginning. Across the country, his supporters gathered at rallies, waving flags and banners, celebrating what they saw as a string of policy victories and diplomatic achievements. The administration touted new trade deals, a booming stock market, and what they claimed were historic agreements with foreign leaders. But beneath the surface, storm clouds were gathering. The administration's winning streak was about to be shattered by two major setbacks, one economic, the other diplomatic. First, troubling signs emerged on Wall Street, with the stock market taking a sudden downturn. At the same time, tensions with Russia began to escalate, threatening the fragile peace that had been so carefully negotiated. The first blow came in the form of a disappointing jobs report. Unemployment numbers unexpectedly rose, and business leaders voiced concern about the direction of the economy. News outlets ran stories questioning the administration's economic narrative, and the public's confidence began to waver. The second setback was even more dramatic. High-stakes peace talks with Russia, once hailed as a diplomatic breakthrough, suddenly collapsed. Negotiations broke down in a very public way, leading to a tense standoff between Washington and Moscow. The world watched anxiously as relations between the two powers deteriorated. Instead of responding with calm and reassurance, President Trump reacted with anger and defiance. He lashed out at critics, treating these setbacks as personal betrayals. Cabinet members and advisors who questioned his approach found themselves in the crosshairs, as the president sought to assign blame. Under pressure, Trump's confrontational style became even more pronounced. His leadership was now defined by a willingness to fight back against any perceived slight, both inside and outside the administration. The atmosphere in the White House grew tense, with staffers unsure of what each new day would bring. The volatility of these days exposed the risks of a presidency built on personal loyalty and deal-making rather than steady governance. Advisors whispered in corridors, alliances shifted, and the sense of uncertainty deepened. The administration's foundation, once seen as unshakable, now appeared vulnerable. The events of August 2025 would become a pivotal chapter in understanding Trump's second term, a period marked by dramatic reversals, high-stakes confrontations, and a leadership style that would leave a lasting impact on the nation's history. Trouble began on August 1, 2025, when the latest jobs report landed with a thud. Instead of the robust growth many had hoped for, the numbers showed only 73,000 new jobs, far below what economists and the White House had predicted. The news sent shockwaves through financial markets and immediately raised questions about the health of the U.S. economy. Investors, analysts, and everyday Americans alike were left wondering, was this a temporary blip or the start of a more troubling trend? The situation worsened as downward revisions for May and June revealed the labor market had been weaker for months. What once looked like steady progress now appeared fragile, with job growth slowing and confidence slipping. Economists scrambled to adjust their forecasts, and the sense of uncertainty deepened. For a president who had staked his reputation and his re-election hopes on a strong economy, this report was more than just bad news. It was a direct challenge to his narrative of prosperity and growth, and it threatened to undermine the central pillar of his administration's message. Trump's response was immediate and characteristically combative. He dismissed the report as fake news, insisting that the numbers were fabricated to damage his presidency. In a flurry of tweets and public statements, he accused the Bureau of Laborstatistics of deliberate sabotage, fueling a storm of controversy. Without offering any evidence, Trump claimed that government officials were manipulating economic data to hurt him politically. He pointed fingers at career civil servants, suggesting a deep state conspiracy against his administration, and called for investigations into the agencies responsible for the numbers. The debate quickly shifted from economic policy to the very integrity of government statistics. Lawmakers, economists, and the public found themselves questioning not just the numbers, but the institutions that produce them. The credibility of agencies like the Bureau of Labor Statistics was suddenly on the line. Trump's supporters echoed his claims, rallying around the idea of a conspiracy against their leader. Meanwhile, critics warned that politicizing neutral agencies could have long-term consequences, eroding trust in the data that guides the nation's economic decisions. The jobs report, once a routine measure of economic health, was now a political battleground. Every number, every revision, became ammunition in a larger fight over truth, trust, and the future of American democracy. The administration's reaction set the stage for a deeper conflict with America's economic institutions, raising questions that would echo far beyond the month's disappointing numbers. In a move that sent shockwaves through Washington, President Trump escalated his confrontation with federal agencies by firing BLS Commissioner erikamcentarfer. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, long considered a pillar of nonpartisan economic data, suddenly found itself at the center of a political storm. Many saw this as punishing the messenger for delivering economic news that clashed with the administration's narrative. The abrupt dismissal raised immediate concerns about the fate of independent analysis in government. Economists and statisticians across the country were stunned. They quickly rallied to defend the BLS's reputation, emphasizing the agency's rigorous standards and its crucial role in providing unbiased data that shapes everything from policy to public perception. At press conferences and academic panels, experts warned that undermining trusted institutions like the BLS could have far-reaching consequences. They cautioned that if data is manipulated or dismissed for political reasons, public trust in government statistics could collapse, and policy decisions might be driven by ideology rather than evidence. The White House, when pressed for details, offered only vague justifications for the firing. This lack of transparency fueled suspicions that the move was politically motivated, rather than based on performance or misconduct. Among Trump's supporters, however, the decision was celebrated. Many saw it as a bold step in the ongoing battle against what they called the deep state, a bureaucracy they believed was resistant to change and accountability. For them, demanding loyalty and results from government officials was long overdue. But for many civil servants, the message was chilling. Critics argued that the firing sent a clear warning. Those who present inconvenient truths or challenge the administration's preferred narrative could face severe consequences. This, they feared, would discourage honest reporting and undermine the integrity of public service. What began as a dispute over economic numbers quickly escalated into a broader crisis about the role of expertise and facts in American democracy. The controversy sparked heated debates in government offices, newsrooms, and on the streets. Now, the independence of federal agencies, once taken for granted, was under intense scrutiny, raising urgent questions about the future of objective governance in the United States. As the jobs report controversy raged, a second crisis erupted abroad. Trump's high-profile peace talks with Putin collapsed, with Russia escalating aggression in Ukraine. The failure undermined Trump's claims of unique diplomatic skill. Russian officials, including Medvedev, taunted the West online, hinting at nuclear threats. Trump provoked, bypassed diplomats, and announced on social media that he'd ordered U.S. nuclear submarines into position. This public declaration was unprecedented, instantly raising global tensions. Supporters called it strength. Experts and allies saw it as reckless escalation. Diplomacy gave way to a volatile standoff, with the world watching anxiously. The president's public announcement about nuclear submarines stunned the world. Such moves are usually secret. Making them public broke decades of protocol and risked dangerous miscalculations. Allies were blindsided, learning of the escalation from the news, not through diplomatic channels. NATO unity was shaken as governments scrambled to respond and urge restraint. Critics, including former officials, condemned the move as reckless and destabilizing. The Pentagon and State Department rushed to contain the fallout, offering reassurances to allies and adversaries alike. But the damage was done. America's unpredictability was now a global concern. The world wondered if this was strategy or impulsive reaction. The logic of nuclear deterrence had never felt so fragile. Amid these crises, Trump escalated trade wars, imposing sweeping tariffs on key partners. A 35% tariff on Canadian imports, tied to a political dispute, strained relations, and disrupted industries. The EU, Japan, and South Korea negotiated lower tariffs, but global supply chains were already rattled. Inflation climbed to 2.7% as businesses faced higher costs, passing them to consumers. Major companies warned of inevitable price hikes. Economists linked the weak jobs report to the uncertainty and costs of the trade war. Trump rejected this, blaming data manipulation and foreign unfairness. The disconnect between policy and economic reality deepened. America's economic pain was now felt at home and abroad. The combination of economic and geopolitical shocks triggered a Wall Street sell-off. The S&P 500 dropped sharply, capping one of the worst weeks in months. Investors fled to U.S. government bonds, signaling fears of a weakening economy. Falling Treasury yields suggested expectations of Federal Reserve intervention. International organizations had already warned that Trump's tariffs threatened global growth. The events of August confirmed those fears, with global forecasts downgraded. The firing of the BLS chief undermined trust in U.S. economic data, a pillar of global finance. Nuclear posturing with Russia added to the sense of instability. The world saw the U.S. exporting risk, not just goods. Confidence in American leadership was shaken. Prominent Republicans and national security figures began to break ranks. John Bolton, former national security advisor, called Trump's nuclear threats proof of unfitness for office. The administration's actions were eroding key institutions. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, after years of cuts, announced it would shut down most operations. This marked a blow to independent journalism and educational programming. Lawmakers, facing public anger, avoided in-person town halls, opting for controlled phone events. The disconnect between officials and citizens grew, reflecting a government under strain. The fabric of American governance was fraying under the pressure of confrontation and loyalty tests. The turmoil began to shift the political landscape ahead of the 2026 midterms. Polls showed Democrats gaining a modest but real lead on the generic ballot. The backlash against Trump's volatility energized the opposition, especially among independents. Democrats framed the election as a referendum on chaos and instability, focusing on inflation, democratic norms, and foreign policy risks. Trump and his allies dismissed negative polls, rallying their base with anti-establishment rhetoric. The country faced deep divisions and uncertainty as summer ended. The events of August had shaken institutions, the economy, and America's global standing. The midterms would test whether voters wanted more disruption or a return to stability.